Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Dear listener, welcome to Kardec Radio. We are here to talk about mediumship, and why not? Life is all about communication, and we are talking about a faculty that exists in everyone's lives. We're all mediums, as Kardec in the Medium's book. First chapters, we hear and understand that we all at some point feel this influence of discarnate spirits, of entities that don't have a physical body. But just like us, tomorrow we're also going to have this experience from the other perspective. It's very interesting because mediumship for the longest time has been treated something special, isolated, quite a rare phenomenon in so many ways. If you talk to people in the streets, they're going to say, yeah, but I prefer not talk about it, or no, they don't exist, spirits don't exist, this is just for special people. And we still look at mediums as if they were special, in the sense that they are privileged and they are people who, for some reason, have a special gift. Is that right? Are only a few people entitled to communicate with minds of the beyond? What is mediumship all about? So if we talk to the higher minds, let's say, if we call here the teachings by Allan Kardec in the Spirit's book, we're going to learn in question and answer 430 that mediumship has been given by God to humankind for a useful and serious purpose, and not so that he may learn what he should not know. That's quite interesting, dear listener. We're talking about a faculty that we all have, but we need to use it seriously and with a great purpose. But how? So this is what we're going to do here in the show today, to open the opportunity to talk about the myths that happen when we talk about mediumship. Many people have misconceptions about it, and actually they may really mess up their lives because they don't know. I remember once going to a place that was not spiritist, people sitting in the living room of their homes, and they were eating snacks. And after, like an hour, they said, okay, let's do a circle and start talking to spirits. And I was like, what? That's not how you actually communicate with spirits. Let me rephrase it, with higher minds. Because higher minds, they need discipline. They need religiousness in the trait of the higher minds of the beyond. So to open the show, and knowing that mediumship, we need to pray, we are going to listen to a message by Joana de Angelis in the book Living and Loving, Fruitful Prayer. And after the break, we're going to be honored to talk to Joe Musi from Canada. He's going to be here to talk to us about the contents of a talk he gave in Toronto, Canada last year, and was quite fascinating, about demystifying mediumship. We need it to improve our lives. Dear listener, enjoy now this beautiful message about Fruitful Prayer by Joana de Angelis.
Chapter 14, Fruitful Prayer.
Prayer is for the soul what bread is for the body. To pray is to open oneself unreservedly to God. To pray is not just to list a number of requests and supplications. Instead, it should be a thanksgiving for the gift of life. When you pray, you establish a link with the whole creation. Silent prayer is better than verbal prayer because words create visual symbols that may interfere with your inner aspirations. When you pray, you identify yourself with the Father and all His other children everywhere. You should pray as naturally as you feed yourself. True prayer is an inner communion between you and God. When men and women become aware of the power of prayer and the boundless positive energies that flood through it, nonviolence and understanding will govern communities and nations, furthering peace to all. Prayer is the language that inspires the spirit and opens doors to higher perception. No one who wants personal perfection will succeed without prayer. Prayer picks up those who have fallen, soothes our anxieties, and teaches us to forgive others. Prayer should be the prelude to all human actions since it fortifies the soul and enables it to overcome any difficulties. Feed your physical body with food. Feed your soul with prayer. Without prayer, your inner link with God will be hampered. Prayer should be your joy. It will help you to face your many battles. The vibrations of prayer bewilders the sinner and helps him to awaken to reason. Prayer inspires noble souls to join forces to assist others. Without prayer, the soul withers like a plant without water. Pray as much as you can. Moreover, try and make your daily life an act of wordless prayer. Jesus taught that
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live, every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Now available for purchase, the book Chico Xavier, Medium of the Century by Guy Léon Playfair. This is the first biographical and critical study in English of one of the outstanding mediums of all time, through whom more than 450 books were received by automatic writing over a 70-year period, few of which until recently were available in English translations. Purchase your copy today at www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com.
The newest edition of the Medium's book by Allan Kardec is now available. Purchase your copy online or via your ebook reader. Simply go to www.ediciofamerica.com today.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Join us every Thursday live. Evolution in Two Worlds. A journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
The Spiritist Society of Baltimore will be holding a special lunch following a movie on January 22nd from 12:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. at the Riscom Mansion in Baltimore, Maryland. There will be delicious Brazilian food. Bring your family and friends for a wonderful day. For more details, go to www.ssbaltimore.org. That is www.ssbaltimore.org.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, mediumship is a natural faculty of human beings. But are we prepared to know that maybe it's not only for a few people and that it's not for privileged people either, and that there is actually rules for the game of, we say game, quote unquote, for the communication between discarnate and incarnates? There are rules. And in that regard, we have here more clarifications for you. Because if people use it usefully and purposefully as recommended by illuminated spirits in the Spirit's book, Question and Answer 430 by Kardec, then our humanity is going to expedite its progress on Earth and make less mistakes. Did you know there is a mediumship also in our day-to-day life? We here have with us in the show today Joe Musi, who is the president and co-founder of the Toronto Spiritist Society, together with his wife, Sandra Musi. And professionally, he holds a Master of Applied Sciences degree in electrical engineering from the University of Waterloo. Last year, we were present in an amazing event promoted by the Joana de Angelis Spiritist Society and several other groups in Toronto. It was the Toronto Spiritist Weekend, and they dedicated to the understanding of mediumship. And amongst other talks, we had Joe Musi giving a talk on the very title of the show today, Demystifying Mediumship. And we were truly impressed by the body of knowledge that he presented to us, a true research. This is interesting, dear listener, because some people ask us, why do we always have the center stage of Spiritist centers as the talks? Because we need to instruct ourselves. But when we prepare talks, we need to be diligent, dedicated, and very responsible, like Joe Musi was. And we're so profoundly inspired that we asked him to come to a program that we will dedicate today at Kardec Radio to the very theme of demystifying mediumship. We need to share this with listeners throughout the world because it's a true research on mediumship. So here we have with us Joe Musi from Toronto, Canada. Hi, Joe. Thank you so much for joining Kardec Radio today.
Hi, Vanessa. I'm very pleased and happy that you invited me to speak today at the Kardec Radio.
Thank you, Joe. You know, we have so much to learn about mediumship. Some people think it's a gift, and other people, when they got to know of Spiritism, they think mediumship belongs to Spiritism, but it's not so, right?
Absolutely not. Spiritism did not discover the notion of mediumship or the spirits. It was a revelation. It was just the spirits coming to us now that we had evolved our science, evolved our morals, and bringing us new teachings to explain things that have been happening all along. Among these things were obviously the mediunic capabilities that have been with us all along, and in fact have been key facilitators and key drivers in human evolution through all of these centuries.
Yeah, and when we talk about mediums of all times, we're talking since humanity has been on the earth, right? You have account of the shamans. Can you tell us a little bit more since when we have registers in the humanity's history about this communication between the two worlds?
Well, obviously, as long as we have good written records, we have some stories that describe what we can only understand as mediumship capabilities. In fact, just a little bit of a story. When I was I was very kindly asked to participate in the symposium last year, I was thinking about what was I going to write about. So what came to mind is this exactly the thing you mentioned, especially in North America, and a lot to do with the culture, Hollywood, spiritualism. There seems to have been created this aura of mystic around this whole practice of mediumship. So we were celebrating the 150 years of the first edition of the Medium's book last year. So I thought it would be a good idea to explain to folks here that that's not the case, that mediumship is but one more of our natural capabilities that Kardec explained, and that we should maybe understand things that happened in the past in a slightly different light. So I was actually in Brazil and thinking how I was going to create this theme when I came across two very interesting books. They are only available in Portuguese, unfortunately, but they were written by Licurgo S. de Lacerda Filho, and they talk about mediumship in the ancient times and Middle Ages. So I used that as my starting point, and then brought in some of the material that I found in these books and added other stories that I could find in other references, and created the presentation that you were there to present, to watch.
Yeah, and can you tell us about, for our listener to know more about some cases of mediums that have existed and they were quite influential, but we haven't heard much of them, but in their local communities, of course. For example, here in Baltimore, there was an amazing healing medium that made a huge difference in the past. And local people know, some people here and there in spiritualism or other more open-minded circles of spirituality, they talk about Olga Warl, but we have never heard about her or her husband elsewhere, like, for example, in Brazil or other countries. So would you have some examples of that account for us?
Well, let's go back to the earliest recorded kind of event that we could basically describe as a mediumship experience. Back in Babylonian time, and we're talking nearly 1,800 years before Christ, Hammurabi was the king of Babylon, and he came up with a new code of law called the Code of Hammurabi. And as the king, he had the right to always write the laws, but these were very sophisticated laws. Nothing like it had been written before. And Hammurabi himself described that he received these laws directly from God. We don't know exactly which gods, because the Babylonians were a society that believed in many gods, but a lot of researchers believe it was a god called Shamash. And in fact, we have found tablets that describe the moment in which the god is transmitting these new laws to Hammurabi. So as spiritists, we know that these type of communications are prime examples of psychography, right? We are receiving messages from high spirits, and maybe to Hammurabi he may have seemed to be the god, and that these spirits are helping these leaders, the king at the time, to start imposing some laws of moral, of civil rights to his people. And they were quite advanced for the time, and some of the principles of these laws still hold today in our own laws.
Mm-hmm.
And next, obviously, similarly to that, we have Moses as certainly a figure that we all know, Father that brought us the Ten Commandments. And many of the stories that we read in the Bible, in the Old Testament, about Moses, including when he went to receive the Ten Commandments from God, it's really a description of another mediumship experience that was happening with him. He was a person that was chosen for this purpose. He was the leader of his people, and this was kind of common. What we see of early mediumship contact is that the spirits were targeting specific leaders and helping them bring together society at a very difficult and rough time.
Yes, and it's interesting you're talking about Moses, because when you talk about Moses, we are talking about somebody who was very, in his time, his own way, very disciplined as well. Because, you know, Joe, when we talk about mediumship, many people, as we said at the beginning of the program, they think that, you know, being a medium is, it's there and I communicate at any time and the way I want. And based on Moses, for example, how long did it take him to go to the mount and receive the message? It wasn't like simply going up, getting the message and coming down, right?
No, it's 40 days. He was 40 days there. And an interesting story is that we know that spirits are very stubborn. So the Bible tells us the story that he brought down the Ten Commandments, and when he came back after 40 days, his people had forgotten everything that he had told them before he left. And they were practicing back all of the old religions and all of the things that he said it was wrong. And in an act of rage, he told his followers to kill all those who were doing this. And obviously, he was immediately violating the very same law he had just brought down from God. Mm-hmm. But he was then forced to go back and receive these very same commandments again. And we know that that's one of the characteristics, that when spirits want to send us a message, if you don't get it the first time, they will do it over and over again until you get it.
And then again, as you're saying this, and it's a beautiful explanation about it, it reminds us of the human part of Moses as a medium, because we often think that mediums are perfect beings, that they know it all, they're in full charge of themselves. And here we have Moses, somebody who was at a very important stature, spiritually speaking, but still he was a human and he had his flaws. But as you said, when it's for a general good, no matter if we have flaws as mediums, as long as we have persistence and good intention, and we have that spirit of sacrifice as he did, the message is going to come, right?
Yes.
The human part of all mediums that people forget.
That's correct. Moses was a person. He was human. He was subject to all of the same complexities and failures that we have today.
Exactly. And you may have other examples of mediums who existed and were influential, as ones you've been talking about at later points in human history, that those they were instruments of great deeds, they were still very human.
Certainly. And what we see after Moses, that for many centuries, essentially from the 9th to the 4th century before Christ, we see the appearance of a number of oracles and similar people who, for different reasons, are given the gift of communication with the spirits. What's most interesting about this is that we have recorded similar kind of activities in basically all around the world. We have records coming from the I Ching in China. Tibet was always a focal point of many, many oracles, and in fact, still today, it is a tradition in the Tibetan people to once a year to have this communication with their spirits. We have records from the Celts, Druids, from the Norse mythology, Africa. We have records in Nigeria. The Mayas were known to have priests that would talk with the gods. Even in Hawaii, there was always certain people that were given this special gift, as it were, at the time. So this was happening all over the world. So it was not something that was unique to one culture, to one religion, to one people. The spirits have always been communicating with us. They have gone through the ages, finding different ways and different manners that was possibly most appropriate for the evolution of the people at the time. And it worked. It worked because it always kept us linked with the spiritual world.
And that's so interesting because as we see, for example, from the account of Chico Xavier, probably you have found a similar experience with other mediums that not necessarily are spiritists. Even before Spiritism came about with the name Spiritism, of mediums that received instructions from their spirit mentors or those voices that they heard, and also recommended them to be very disciplined and to be really careful about the way they were leading their lives. Do you find similarities also in the history of other mediums throughout humankind?
I think the similarities, as I said, come in waves. So before Christ, these were mostly pagan prophets or oracles. One of the most famous that we certainly all probably have heard of is the Oracle of Delphi, and these were all women. I think there's another characteristic that from early on there seemed to be a more common occurrence of mediumship activities with women than men in the early times. These communications were similar in nature. They were all regarding the survival and the growth of the individual communities that they were supporting. So they didn't have yet a bigger moral base around them. They were still creating the certainty that the life on earth was not the beginning and the end of all, that there was a continuity, and that humans, the incarnates, had to pay attention to what would be coming from the spiritual world. This changes when Jesus comes to earth.
And why does it change?
Because Jesus brings back the aspects of the moral code. He brings back a new interpretation, a new revelation of all of the things that were being tried to be said up to that time, starting from Moses, starting from all of these other communications. He simplifies them, but he also makes it very clear that it is in the moral growth that we will find our salvation, it will find our evolution as spirits.
And that's so interesting you're saying this, Joe, because this is another myth that happens on the minds of people regarding mediumship. They think, once you're a medium, things are going to happen without rules. And they think the rules do not pertain their inner transformation. Some people don't even like that we mention the word moral. And I've come across different people in the United States who come to us in spiritist centers or places where we give lectures, and they say, Vanessa, I love everything about spiritism, but you know what? When people talk about this inner transformation all the time, I don't like it. And I said, it's like gravity. It's there. If you like it or not, if you don't watch out, you're going to fall. And that's pretty much what you're saying. After Jesus, we got to know that the main rule of engagement is the inner transformation and the moral alignment, right? And
yes.
The main reason is because of what you're saying, the type of connection that you make regarding your vibratory state.
That's correct. And I find similar experiences with folks finding it hard to kind of receive these moral rules and moral laws, and that they become so important. But if you think about it, what's the point of evolving if all we're evolving is our intellect or evolving our capabilities, our physical capabilities? What use are them when we go back to the spiritual realm? It is our morality, it is our understanding of the need to be charitable, to be good, and to love one another that's going to make the real difference for us.
Exactly. And you have accounts of mediums that really exemplified, even way before Spiritism came about, between Jesus' time onwards, that were good examples of, let's say, ethical moral alignment.
Yes, and from this point on now, you're going to see that the medium communications take on a much more religious tone, a religious channel now, where it is now centered around, especially in the Western civilization, around reinforcing the principles that Jesus brought to us when he was here. And this begins very early on with some of the early Christians. And one of the martyrs that's recognized by the Catholic Church is a lady by the name of Vibia Perpetua. And she described that she, from a very early age, even when she was 7, she would start receiving these messages and visions that would describe to her what she needed to do and what was her path in terms of reaching heaven, right? So she becomes very religious, and to the point where at the time it was basically against the law to practice Christianism. Remember, this was a girl that was only 22 years old. She was already married. She was a noble. She had everything that you needed to be a healthy, wealthy person and have a happy life. But these visions come to her so strongly that she cannot ignore them. And she becomes a kind of a spokeswoman at the time with her. She also had another martyr called Felicity. She was her slave, and she would also have these visions. Both of them eventually get condemned for their crime of being Christians and are sent to their death in the arena to be killed by wild animals. So here's a story of someone who had no reason to imagine these things, and she was very clear about all of the visions she had in terms of things she knew was waiting for her in the spiritual world. And she was killed at the age of 22.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. And again, as you're saying, before you continue this beautiful explanation, you mentioned before that most part of these mediums we have account are women, and Leon Denis, the French spiritist, he actually explains this in the book named In the Invisible, in which he talks about the reasons why majority of accounts of mediums come from women, because the feminine inside of us is the key point for the whole process of communication. And the feminine does not belong to women alone, because since Carl Gustav Jung, the great psychoanalyst, we got to know that both men and women have the feminine inside, and it's beyond the biological features. But since you have this feminine allowing the features of mediumship to come about, it's more common to find them in women, right?
That's right. And I think also because men at that time, from a very early age, were already being trained and driven and educated to a specific mission they were to fulfill in their lives, right? Society was very, certainly man-centric. So these kids maybe didn't have the opportunity to explore their own mediumnic capabilities because they were already taken off track by all of the other things they had to do.
Exactly. So, Joe, our question to you is, what do you find in the medieval times? Because it was a very difficult time for mediums to be mediums, but since mediumship is quite organic, as says Kardec, it exists it's in the human nature. What happens to mediums at the medieval times?
We see a new, we call it generation or new phase of mediumship. So now we start getting mediums receiving these messages that are towards teaching the aspects of prayer, the aspects of God, the aspects of arts and sciences. We have the example of a woman by the name of Hildegard von Bingen. She was, again, a noble family. She was born in Germany, and from a very early age, she would have visions. Again, similar to what we saw with Vibia, Hildegard had these visions, and they were so strong, and they started around the age of 8, which is very similar to what we saw before as well. And she describes this, and it's very interesting in her own words. It says, "I've always had these visions in my soul. I don't hear with my external ears, nor understand the thoughts of my own heart, or any combination of my senses, but only in my soul, as my external eyes are wide open." This is a typical description that we hear from the mediums of today of how they receive these messages. So we have someone here nearly 1,000 years ago describing this, and she became a very prolific person in terms of books that she wrote. She describes in great detail. She had 26 visions that she documented in her books. And one of them, she predicted a regenerated world where angels will return with confidence to stay among men, which is very timely, as we know that we have going through a regeneration process of our own world, and that the angels are nothing but the spirits that will stay among us.
And Joe, we are here. We're going to listen to a new segment, and it's from Kirsten DeMello. It's Spiritist Moment, and she's going to give us some highlights on mediumship pertaining to what we're talking about, and we'll be right back with you, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Hello, dear Kardec Radio listeners. I'm Kirsten DeMello with the Spiritist Moment. Today, our reflections will be about mediumship. And as always, we recommend you go and study on your own or at your Spiritist Center about this particular subject. And as always, recommend to starting out with Kardec's codification, mainly the Spirit's book first, as Kardec recommends in the beginning of the Medium's book, to better understand all that is in the Medium's book, to first go and read the Spirit's book. So we ask ourselves, what is mediumship? Who is a medium? As already discussed in today's talk at Kardec Radio. Kardec himself, in the Spiritist magazine that was published in 1859 in February, he states, "A medium is, therefore, whomever is able to receive or transmit the communication of the spirits, whichever are the means employed, and the degree of development of their faculties, from the most simple occult influence to the production of the most uncommon phenomenon. However, in the current use, the word has a more restricted meaning, and it is generally applied to people who are endowed with a very great mediumnic power, either to produce physical effects or to transmit the thoughts of the spirits through writing or through speech." These are some thoughts for us to reflect about, and we can read further in the Medium's book as well to further understand. And so we ask ourselves, perhaps you all are asking as well, who are mediums? Am I a medium? How do I know if I'm serving as a medium? Well, something else Kardec says in the beginning of the Medium's book, he states, "The rules of poetry, painting and music do not make people poets, painters, or musicians if they do not have the gift in the first place. Such rules only guide them as they use their natural abilities." So thus, dear friends, this is how we understand mediumship. That although you may understand all the rules of poetry and how to play a guitar, you will know and understand all of the chords. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're a musician. You may be beginning to learn about how to play guitar. You are beginning to learn how to paint or even write poetry. But it doesn't necessarily make you a poet just yet. And thus we understand mediumship. That perhaps we know all about mediumship. We've studied thoroughly and understand it. But it doesn't automatically make us mediums. It just makes us people who are developing it. And thus, this is how it is explained to us. Kardec also goes on to explain, and he says, although mediumship is an organic faculty per se, the good or bad use that the medium lends to it depends on his moral standards. Therefore, a medium who does not work towards his own edification becomes an easy prey to evil spirits, imparting an improper purpose to a gift that was granted to him by God so it could serve as an instrument for his inner betterment. Well, dear friends, we learn that mediumship is something to take very seriously, and even more so, as always, our own inner refinement is ultimately what is so important in our day-to-day lives. No matter who we are, what religion we belong to, it is extremely important for this fact that we understand through Spiritism that we become prey to the so-called evil spirits when we are not working on our own betterment, on working on our inner world, because our mistakes, our weaknesses can attract these negative spirits towards us. Those who don't yet understand, much like us, all there is to know about the true happiness in life. And thus, further, we reflect that mediumship is a blessing. Why is it a blessing? Well, for one, it reminds us that we are not alone. We're not alone, and we can gain so much support from our spiritual guides and the benevolent spirits who come to encourage us, for we know that we are still at a level where we suffer a lot with our own mistakes, or perhaps with the trials that we must endure in order for us to evolve and to develop. So we feel this strength and encouragement through mediumship, through the writings of many famous or not so famous mediums. We gain a lot of insights to better understand ourselves. So, dear friends, these thoughts are just meant to be a small teaser into understanding the depths of mediumship. We wish you many blessings on your beginning or already on this journey of learning about mediumship. And as always, from the Spiritist Moment, we wish you many blessings.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Enjoy this new release. Reborn for Love, by the renowned Brazilian scientist and researcher on reincarnation, Dr. Hernani Andrade. This novel describes one of the most extraordinary and genuine cases of reincarnation ever studied by Dr. Andrade's Brazilian Institute of Psychobiophysics Research in Sao Paulo State. Order your copy now at roundtable.uk@gmail.com or at www.roundtablepublishing-uk.com.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Want to find a good way to explain life after physical death to kids or teenagers? Check out the book Message from a Teen in the Spirit World by the Spirit Neo Lucio and Psychograph by Chico Xavier. In this book, a teenager named Carlos explains his impressions on the new life in the spirit realm with his discarnate relatives and new friends. Purchase your copy online at www.ssbaltimore.org.
The Spiritist Magazine is a trimestral digital periodical that publishes the latest news on the Spiritist thought and the movement in the USA and worldwide. Subscribe now at www.spiritistmagazine.com.
In the book, A Primer on Being Good by the Spirit May May, psychographed by the medium Chico Xavier, explains in simple language appropriate for children two paths in life, the path of good or the path of evil. God has granted us the freedom to choose either one. Purchase your copy online at www.ssbaltimore.org.
Now we return to our program.
Dear listener, we're here talking about demystifying mediumship because the fact is we still have a lot of myths about mediumship going on. And, you know, it's not productive to keep things that way. And that's why we're dedicating this whole program to getting to know more about the true facts of mediumship, and mainly the fact that mediumship is so natural, like intelligence. It belongs to the realm of human mind. And, you know, when we talk about the human mind, we'd like to share with you, as Joe Musi has already talked about, you know, the wings of progress are two. We talk about intelligence and feelings, moral. So In the book Evolution into Worlds by Andrea Lewis, chapter 19, which we're studying at the Spirit Society of Baltimore, there's a chapter entitled Reincarnation and Evolution. There's a beautiful account on that regard by Andrea Lewis. He says, individuals that have extraordinary kindness many times require ennobling knowledge, and many others they have grown in intelligence may have only scarce virtues. So, of course, here we have, the balance of intelligence and our moral lives. And would mediumship require that balance as well? So, Joe, we're here talking to Joe Musi from Canada, and he's telling us great, interesting information about mediums of all times and trying to demystify mediumship in the many myths. So, Joe, when we talk about the balance of intelligence and the heart, the moral part of ourselves, did you have accounts of other mediums besides spiritist mediums, which we're going to talk about very soon, that were good examples of, being great, intelligent, but also very aligned, morally speaking?
Well, the story that we're telling and kind of this time travel that we went back in time, if we take the next step, we're here now up to the early 13th century. We have three extraordinary people that were friends, that knew each other, and they were exceptional mediums as well. And they were three of the most important people to start establishing many of the moral foundations of Christianity that would follow. And of course, I'm going to mention them, and they should be very familiar names for all of us. I'm talking about St. Francis of Assisi, St. Anthony of Padua, and St. Clare, also of Assisi. These three individuals made tremendous progress in the dissemination of the Christian teaching, especially around the morals and the need of being charitable to those who are in need. We know the story of St. Francis. He was yet another noble person who gave everything up to start his own order, the Franciscan order. He had visions of angels that would come to him. These visions would tell him what he needed to do, how he was going to create this order. And among the most unique physical events, occurrences that happened with St. Francis, he was the first known person to be known to have experienced the phenomenon of stigmata. He had, while he was in a state of ecstasy praying, he was given the 5 wounds of Christ, the same wounds that Christ received while he was at the cross. And this was, again, another demonstration coming from the spiritual world of the validity of the faith of the message that St. Francis was giving. St. Anthony, a Portuguese noble person again, was a follower of St. Francis. He also experienced a quite number of mediunic capabilities. He was one of the first recorded cases of bicorporeity, which means that he was in 2 places at the same time. And remember, this was at a time that travel was very difficult because you had to go by horse, by you have to walk. And at this time, we also start to have very good written records of things that were happening. So St. Anthony was recorded to being in 2 places at the same time. He was seen in Italy, but also seen in Lisbon within a period of a few hours. And people knew that was impossible, but there were witnesses, there were accounts of he providing this experience. St. Clare was a very good friend of St. Francis. She started a number of orders herself, And she was also a very prolific medium. Many, many records of premonitions. She would see disincarnated spirits. She would know about people who had just recently died, who were not close to her, and she would be able to tell all of the messages that they were trying to give to their family and friends. So these three became actually saints within the Catholic Church, and that's kind of part of the subtitle of my presentation. It was a tale of saints and witches. Over time, all of the people who had these extraordinary mediunic capabilities were either tagged as saints, as someone that was given to us by God directly for a special purpose, but if they didn't follow the prescribed message that was expected of them, and they had other things that they were saying, they were immediately tagged as witches, which unfortunately became the norm soon after this period with the beginning of the medieval Inquisition. The church was establishing itself. It was threatened by some of the messages, some of the practices that were done by mediums, and as we were discussing before, many of them being women, often uneducated and subject to this persecution, and many, unfortunately, had to be burned to death because they were just practicing what came natural to them.
So let me interrupt you a minute and ask you a question. As you're talking about the mediums at mostly medieval time, and let's talk about one of the most still controversial in so many ways, not in Spiritism but elsewhere, Joan of Arc and her mediumship.
Yes, she was certainly a medium. Imagine she was but a young girl, a teenager. As we see very often, mediunic capabilities often arise in the early teens. She was receiving messages of the importance of her role in the war that was taking place between England and France at the time. Against all opposition of an uneducated poor girl, she went on, and her belief was so strong because she had experienced these visions directly, and she believed she had faith so strong in them. She went on to lead armies of men, which was something unheard of before that, and even after that, there was no one like her. And again, while she was on the right side of the prevailing forces, and she helped the French defeat the British, as her position continued and became now later not so agreeable with the folks in power, she was then branded a witch, and she had to ultimately pay the price for it. She would not renegade on her visions and her role, and she defied the king, and she was killed for that.
And let's take her case and talk about prohibition on talking or interacting with the dead. Cynthia Fabretti is at the Kardec Radio chat room, and she asked us to talk about the Spiritist view on these prohibitions that happen in some religions since Moses' time. We've talked about him, and now we talk about Joan of Arc as one of the mediums who were burned at stake because of the very fact that they allowed the communication to go on.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. First of all, if somebody is going through the trouble to prohibit something, is because they accept that thing is possible, it actually happens. So if the religions that prohibit us incarnates from talking with spirits is because, even though they may not admit it explicitly, they are in fact understanding that such communication is possible. And they try to paint this as a kind of a naughty thing, something that shouldn't be done, that's against God's laws, or that these communications only come from bad spirits, devils, demons, and so forth. I think it's, again, human nature to defend one's principles well beyond the rationale or the truth of those beliefs. these communications, because you don't have control over them, the spirits are providing us with guidance, which might be in terms of defying existing practices or existing dogmas or messages. They become a threat. And the first thing that humans do when they are threatened, they go on the defensive. And if you're in power, what you do is you prohibit people from doing it. It's something that has changed over time, that the recognition of the communication with spirits is a recognized fact, and that we just need to understand and be educated and prepared to do it properly.
Exactly. So now, Joe, we have people lined up for questions, but before we open the line, we would like to ask everybody to listen to a new segment of Spiritism in Your Life with Marco Magalhães that is going to talk about mediumship in our lives. And then when we come back, we're going to get back with Joe Mosi and the listeners who want to ask questions. We'll be right back with you.
Dear Kardec Radio listeners, welcome to our show Spiritism in Your Lives. Today's topic is mediumship. We can define mediumship for short as the interaction or influence by the spirits in any level. So we can think about this as we are small radio receivers. Through our thoughts, we can actually tune in the station we want. This station could be that of your mentor, your guardian angel, or suffering spirits. That really depends on what is the wavelength and what is the signal that you're projecting through your thought. And this connection is actually what people call mediumship. So the next question is, who are the mediums? Are they special in any way? And in the Medium's book, Allan Kardec brings to us the definition that everyone who's any degree influenced by spirit is, by that very fact, a medium. This faculty is inherent in man and is therefore no exclusive privilege. In other words, mediums are just like you and me. They carry the same responsibilities and weaknesses. They are also fallible. They're not special beings. They're not fortune tellers. They're not oracles or sorcerers. This is just an organic capability that's inherent to all of us. And Allan Kardec also brings to us that this phenomena, occurring in virtue of natural law, are neither marvelous nor supernatural in the ordinary sense of the words. To summarize that idea, mediumship is not a miracle. It is a very complex phenomena that takes place every day in our lives. And considering that, how can we identify the signs of mediumship in our daily lives? Number 1, intuition and inspiration. How many times we have that idea that seems to be coming from nowhere and suddenly strikes our mind? How many times we feel inspired to do something? Of course, inspiration and intuition can be also for good or bad things, and that really depends on where are we connecting our thoughts. Number 2, we have impression or feeling that something is happening or is around us. This is mostly designed to people that can recognize the presence of spirits, but in a vague impression, a sort of shuddering sensation that runs through the body, but we cannot really identify that precisely. Number 3, during our dreams we have the ability of communicate to spirits a little bit more freely because we're partially freed from our body and we can remember this many times, and this is one of the good examples of mediumistic phenomena. Number 4, now we have presentiment and premonition. Again, how many times we have the presentiment that something is about to happen, or we have a premonition in detail that something's going to happen. Number 5, fascination, and that's also one of the signs of an obsession, is that when you think that your ideas and your thoughts and what you're doing are so perfect, you start to be so connected to your ideas that you start losing the ability to criticize your own acts and you get fascinated. Number 6, fixed ideas. How many times these fixed ideas come through our mind, either good or bad ones, that we cannot control, and they start to take over our ability to concentrate and focus. Number 7, physical disturbances that happen around us and we cannot explain. And also, finally, any sensorial observations that cannot be explained, including seeing, hearing, or feeling the presence of spirits. Some people do it more extensively, and some people don't. These are some of the basic signs of mediumship in your daily life. Dear listeners, we're coming to the end of our show, and we want to ask you the following question. How does mediumship, under the view and the teachings of Spiritism, can help us? Mediumistic phenomena, since early ages in our history, has opened eyes and opened doors for people to actually understand that there's something else out there, and called the attention of many people that started studying and started to put together many of theories and ideas that we're studying today in Spiritism. So if used properly, mediumship is an amazing tool and can be used for moral and intellectual development, and also for helping others through healing or through alleviating the suffering of other people. And Spiritism, most importantly, is going to bring us the principles to understand and make the good use of mediumship. Dear listeners, thank you again for being here with us today. And remember that mediumship is an exercise of discipline. God bless us.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Strand Releasing proudly releases on DVD the Brazilian blockbuster Astral City, A Spiritual Journey. Based on the best-selling book by medium Chico Xavier, the film tells the story of André Luiz, a successful doctor who experiences an enlightening spiritual awakening after his death. Buy your copy now. Contact us at www.strandreleasing.com.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book Action and Reaction by the Spirit André Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
Come and enjoy the 5th Spiritist Society of Baltimore Forum entitled Honoring Life, which will take place on February 11th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Spirit Society of Baltimore headquarters, where topics such as abortion, death penalty, collective karma, and much more will be discussed. For more information, go to www.ssbaltimore.org.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, we are in the last part of our show today, which is about demystifying mediumship. Did you know that Kardec Radio is here in more than 54 countries? Yes, we are. We have listeners all around. Many people actually kindly send us emails with requests for topics. They also send emails blessing us for the work. And you can join forces with us. How can you help? You can help, number one. Always you can help by helping us paying the expenses of Kardec Radio, because sometimes people think it's free of charge. It's not. We actually pay to have the website and to host it at Blog Talk Radio, etc., etc. You can always help by contacting us at kardecradio@gmail.com, and we'll send you information on how to go by helping Kardec Radio. Also, you can help by putting together information about your center, about your books, your publisher, and send it to us, because when we, screen the commercials here, we don't get any penny for it, because we really work out of our pocket here. We do it out of charity. All the commercials we display, we don't get a penny for it. So if you'd like to have something on your center being advertised, an event or a book or something, send us an email with the paragraph that talks about the screener, and our team is going to provide the recording of the screener, and we're going to put them in the show. If you help, if we join forces, we're certainly going to get there. So now back to the beautiful conversation we're having with Joe Mosi, who is the president and co-founder of the Toronto Spiritist Society, together with his wife, Sandra Mosi, and also Marco and Joyce Magalhães, who are also part of the group as well and have been helping them a lot, who are the host of the segment Spiritism in Your Life. And Joe is here telling us beautiful information about mediums of all times and demystifying mediumship. But Joe, we'd like now to talk more about spiritist mediums. Usually people talk about Chico Xavier, Divaldo Franco, Raul Teixeira, Surly Schubert, but there are many influential mediums in Spiritism, though it's now like more than 150 plus years, that made a huge difference in the movement in itself, and they were quite human as well. Can you share a little bit more with us in that regard?
Well, I think that the first point is that a lot of the stories that I've been bringing here today, this is what we call the natural mediums, right? These capabilities come to them naturally, and often they don't know how to react to it, and it takes time for them to actually accept it. With Spiritism and the work of the codification from Kardec, he demonstrated that we can actually develop these same kind of capabilities through our study, through our prayers, through our hard, disciplined work. And I think that the existence today of literally thousands of Spiritist centers in Brazil and around the world, here in Toronto, in Canada, in the U.S., where we have small mediumship groups where typically one or two of these people that participate in the groups have developed their mediumship capabilities, and through these capabilities are providing great work of assistance, of communication, of dissemination of Spiritism. These are the true workers that we have today. These are the true mediums that are making the difference for the Spiritist movement. It's through the weekly sessions where we have communications with spirits in needs that are confused, that need guidance, other spirits who are trying to communicate with us generically or with specific people. Without these mediums that work so hard, that dedicate every week, multiple times a week, their time, their energy to allow this communication to take place, to me, these are the true heroes of the mediumship world today that's making the biggest difference for us all. We have a number of current Spiritist writers who are mediums who receive information. We have those who are the most well-known. We have a number of others who are just beginning now. And I think that speaks very well for us in terms of the future that we have ahead of us for Spiritism.
And it's quite interesting, as you're saying, these mediums, they show true examples of, let's talk about Yvonne Pereira, for example, a medium that, according to Chico Xavier, can be considered the greatest medium of the 20th century in Spiritism, according to Chico Xavier himself. Of course, he's quite humble because we know how striking his mediumship and has been, and the impact in human society, not only Brazil, but it's coming about in other places as well. So when we talk about Yvonne Pereira and her great mediumship and her story, can we tell a little bit more about it?
I don't have a lot of information on her myself. That was not part. My presentation took us all the way up to the beginning of Spiritism.
Okay. So just for a brief note for the listeners, so they also get, engaged into this beautiful mediumship of Ivone Pereira, she got acquainted with Spiritism and really surrendered to the task in a very disciplined manner. And I remember talking to Divaldo Franco and Raul Teixeira about their, friendship with Yvonne and how much she taught them about mediumship. And especially, for example, because nowadays, Joe, as you're talking about writing mediumship, many people, they write their books and they quickly want to publish them. Not that they write, the spirits write their books. And at Kardec's time, it was so different. And even for Yvonne, she was so truthful to the message that when she received the message of, the memories of a suicidal spirit, it stayed there for decades, awaiting approval from the publisher. And she didn't get rebellious at all, and it became like a trademark in the understanding of what happens to the suicidal mind in the afterlife. It's quite an exquisite book regarding knowledge and regarding consolation as well. We hear there the true description of the theme of Mother Mary in the afterlife being responsible for rescuing suicidal spirits. It's quite beautiful and profound. Of course, she talks about the flip side of the coin of suicide. But why am I mentioning this to the listener now is because many people think that, so beautiful messages are coming to us, let us publish it. And that's it. And, we need to think that at Kardec's time, everything took time. And the mediums, if you go to the mediums book, for example, or even the gospel, all Kardec's books, all the spirit messages, you don't know the names of the mediums of the time. They were not center stage. And at our time now, they are becoming center stage to the point that when people publish the books, they put the names of the mediums in more bold letters than even the spirit. And this is really changing the course of events. So when you talk about the beginning, when you talk about the teenagers who were mediums at Kardec's time and in his team, can you tell us more a little bit so the listener knows who they were?
Well, we talked even in terms of St. Clair. She was very, very young when she started to have her first visions. We also have two incredible other ladies. One was Saint Teresa de Avila. She was born in Spain. She was a Carmelite nun, and she was one recorded case of mediums who were given the ability to levitate. It was interesting because during a certain, I talked about these waves of specific mediunic capabilities. So in the beginning of the 16th century, we have a couple of very prominent and recorded examples of religious people who would go deep into their meditation, into their prayer, and they would be able then to levitate at that point. They were so relieved from their earthly bounds that they would fly. St. Peter of Alcantara was another example of this. He was a very rigorous and disciplined religious, and there were incredible records of the times when he would levitate. But the other person I'd like to talk about is a nun by the name Maria de Jesus de Agreda. She was another Spaniard Catholic nun. She did begin to receive her visions at a very early age, and because of that, she was put into a religious order. And what was most incredible about her is she had the ability of bicorporeity again, the ability to be in two places at the same time. And this was not in two kind of European countries. There are recorded events that she actually would appear to the Indians in Texas, in New Mexico, and would start to the evangelization of these missions even before any white man had reached them. she prepared the ground of the religious teachings, to the point that when the Spaniards finally got to these regions in North America, they were surprised to hear stories of these Indians who could actually describe her and had all of the basic Christian teachings already given to them.
Yes, and Joe, now the ultimate question, and Cynthia Fabretti again is asking us, and we were planning on, because this is the ultimate myth in mediumship. Nowadays, especially in America, people come to us and tell us, no, if you don't charge for services, etc., people are not going to respect you. And why do we give freely what we freely receive, like mediumship, Joe? This is the myth in mediumship. Many people think, especially nowadays, that, I'm a great medium, I spend my time. And there was even a time at the Spirit Society of Baltimore that there were people coming from different walks of life, and they are always welcome, but they came to me and said, Vanessa, if you keep doing this free of charge, you're creating debt to people because they are given blessings they need to pay back. And we don't think so. That's not how we do the math of life. So how can we demystify this aspect of mediumship and explain why in Spiritism we not believe, but we are sure that we need to do it free of charge?
Well, I think it comes from Kardec himself when he says, without charity there is no salvation, right? So if we understand that this capability that's inherent in all of us, but most of us have to develop and practice and be disciplined about it, that the only way that this ability is going to be useful to us in terms of a spiritual evolution, if we see this as a practice of charity, see this as a special gift that we are using, the gift that comes from God, and that we use to help incarnates and disincarnates alike. So first of all, if we the notion of charging, obviously, is only focused on the assistance the mediums would give to incarnates. How about the disincarnates? How would they be able to pay us? Should we ignore them and focus exclusively on those who can give us financial rewards? That would defeat the very principle of the abilities of mediumship. And I think that there's also an inherent danger that if we were all to charge for these abilities, this would be a natural attraction of charlatans and people who would fool the innocent, the folks who are in need, giving them false hope and cheating them of their money and cheating them of the belief that they were actually receiving true communications. So it's a matter of understanding what is the purpose of us being mediums and how it will best benefit those that come to us, both the disincarnates and the incarnates, as well as how it needs to help us. The financial rewards that we could get are nothing in comparison to the bigger reward of our own personal evolution.
So ideally, Joe, we would say that if one wants to work on their mediumship, they really need to not make it as a profession and have their own profession, their own resources to cover their expenses and practice mediumship in their free time, right?
Well, yes, that's a lot of the cases, that's the case. But we also see the development, especially we see in Brazil, of spiritist charitable organizations that provide all kinds of other type of charitable works that's not directly linked to mediumship. And because of their recognition, because of the work they do receive quite a bit of donations. And in fact, they can support some of the activities around mediumship without being a fee-for-service approach. So the creation of the Spiritist centers, where they are established as charitable organizations that do all of the charitable work that we're supposed to be doing, this is another way to help us, have the ability to pay for a place to have our medium sessions every week, to have material that we can publish and so forth. So individually, we have to create this as our own contribution, our own charity. In a bigger picture, we hope that the establishment of the Spirit centers and organizations will provide some ability to support more of those who may not have the ability to do this out of their pocket.
All right, Joe. I know we have a lot more to learn, but we'll bring you back in the future if God allows. And would like to ask you, what would you be your final comments to our listener regarding demystifying mediumship, please?
Well, just believe that we all have the medium capabilities within us, that not all of them are the same. We all have unique capabilities just as we do for everything else. Is that it is our faith, it is our discipline, it is our study of mediumship that will allow us to develop these capabilities and use them for the purpose for which they were created.
All right. We are so grateful that you gave of your time and of your research to illuminate our minds and inspire us all. We hope to have you back here, and we wish you many blessings, Joe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vanessa, for inviting me. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you. Dear listener, we're talking about demystifying mediumship. Some few highlights here so we never forget. We need discipline, discipline, discipline. Mediumship is not something that we can do out of our own pleasure and time as it pleases us. No, we need to study. And some people are like, study? Study what? Oh, no, I'm a medium. I don't need to study to talk to spirits. We need to study to understand the laws of spirit communication, to understand what André Louis says in the book Mechanisms of Mediumship, the law of the mental field, to know that there are rules. And if we go to the medium's book, Kardec explains how the communications happen. It's mind to mind, perispirit to perispirit. In other words, spiritual body to spiritual body. And we need to understand how it happens, the different types as well. And as Joe has already said to us, we also needed to work on our inner transformation because we're going to connect with the very minds that resonate to us. And though we're humans, we need to be very persistent and to work on it day in, day out, and progress. And you know what? When we go talk about mediumship and the myths of mediumship, there is much need of preparation. Much need of preparation and need of also what Kardec calls the conditions for good communications, as in the item of 341 of the Medium's book. Kardec talks about the conditions for good spirit communication, and amongst them, he says, perfect communion of minds and feelings amongst the people who are in the meeting. So if I have someone in the same circle or meeting with me in which there is envy, jealousy, etc., it's not going to work. These are going to be open doors for the bad spirits to come and play. That's why we need to know the laws of spirit communication. 2, we cannot work on it alone. It's very dangerous. Read the medium's book and you're going to get to know more. Mediumship is all about teamwork. Look at the most productive mediums of all times. Chico Xavier, Divaldo Franco, they always worked in team. If you want to go solo, you're not going to go too far. Not at all. Plus, there is a great risk of obsession, fascination, as we say in Spiritism. So, dear listener, the first step into working for demystifying mediumship is to know the role of prayer. Because when Allan Kardec opens the chapter 28 in the Gospel According to Spiritism, he clearly outlines that amongst all the prayers, the Lord's Prayer is at the forefront. Then there are prayers for spiritist meetings and prayers for mediums. As he says in the introduction, if good mediums sometimes make use of imperfect instrument, it is to give good counsel and to endeavor to lead them to do good, to obtain the assistance of good spirits and to avert frivolous and deceitful ones. One should be the objective of constant effort by all serious mediums. Otherwise, mediumship is a barren faculty that may even revert to the harm of the ones who possess it, because it may degenerate into dangerous obsession. Rather than flattering themselves for a faculty that does not belong to them, mediums who understand their duty attribute to God the good things they obtain. If their communications merit praise, they do not flatter themselves because of it, for they know that such communications are independent of their personal merit, and they render thanks to God for having allowed good spirits to manifest through them. If these communications give rise to criticism, they are not offended by it because they are not the work of their own spirit. So, dear listener, now we invite you to understand a little bit more about how to pray when we are mediums. In Kardec's own words, let us pray now for all mediums, and pray specially. If we are mediums, we need to pray all the more in this fashion. Almighty God, allow good spirits to assist us in the communication that I am asking for. Keep us from the presumption of thinking that we are safe from evil spirits. Keep us away from the presumption of pride that may deceive us regarding the worth of what we obtain. And keep us from the presumption of all sentiment contrary to charity with respect to other mediums. And if we are induced to err, inspire someone with a thought to warn us, and inspire us with the humility to accept and acknowledge criticism, and to take for ourselves, not for others, the counsels that good spirits wish to dictate to us. If we have been tempted to abuse in any way whatsoever the faculty that it pleased you to have granted me, or to flatter myself for it, we ask that you take it away rather than allow it to be diverted from its providential purpose, which is the good of all and our own moral advancement. Dear listener, we're very grateful to Joe Mosi. Let us send him a big hug of gratitude, and to all the Kardec Radio team who have been working very hard to provide to everyone an opportunity of nourishment of our souls. Next week, we have another great show scheduled, Energy Work and Mediumship. Dr. Melvin Morse, who became renowned by his work on near-death experiences in children. As a pediatrician, he became also a researcher of the beyond. He's going to be here with us talking about interesting aspects of mediumship and his new research on remote viewing and much more. We wish you this week many blessings. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to write to us at kardecradio@gmail.com or go to kardecradio.com and fill out the contact form. We'll be very happy to hear from you and share the good news that there is much more lying ahead of us. God bless us all.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardec.com. kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.